Well, good morning. It's a cold and crisp January morning. I'm joined by Gareth, and we're going to be talking about purpose and specifically putting purpose into action. So, morning, Gareth. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you.
It's an early start for you.
It is, but it's a regular early start. Three small children, so I'm normally up at this time, just normally running around after them rather than trying to tell some intellectual conversation about my purpose.
Fantastic.
Screaming about putting pants on and brushing teeth rather than, yeah, so.
But pants into action is a slightly different conversation to the one that we're going to talk about.
It's a slightly shorter and louder story.
That's fantastic. Well, the purpose of this chat is really to understand how individuals are being inspired by that kind of search and meaning and what they're doing around putting purpose into action. I find it hard to scroll through LinkedIn these days without coming across a variety of posts from individuals just that I know that are making quite substantial life choices right now and changing careers. And I think there's definitely that search for more meaning and purpose. So what I wanted to start off with was just to see if you can describe what your purpose is and a little bit around the purpose journey that you've been on.
Yeah. Okay. So I always kind of joke that there's sort of like the pithy version, the 7-8 words that summarize it, and then there's the kind of the bigger piece. So that the pithy version for me is, it's been about, or at the moment at least, is bringing soul and humanity back into organizations. Mm-hmm. So the short explanation would be, I think that organizations have got a bit too lost in the kind of capitalist model. They treat people like resources, not human beings often. We get very hung up on the kind of very rational, the evidence, the data, and sort of miss sometimes the value of how things feel and what's the impact on the work that we're doing on us as human beings. And that's not me saying it's an either or. For me, it's both and. Mm-hmm. Yeah, mm-hmm. How do you bring more of that piece into the equation and understand that? So I guess to say that this is the current iteration. It's always been for me something about helping people, mm-hmm. and in most aspects of life, I really like the idea that it's something that it evolves, it develops, matures, and often in my coaching, I liken it for people to a record with the needle going round and round, which is a terrible metaphor for showing my age, but it's this idea that as you go round something and you get slowly pulled into the center point of what it really is. And so this is, for me, is like the current evolution of where I am on it. It's evolved and changed over time.
I think that concept of the iteration is really important, isn't it? And it's how you put it into practice. Yeah. When do you think you actually connected with a sense of understanding your purpose, being able to articulate it and recognize that it was kind of a needle, and that you wanted to follow that purpose rather than what was the point when you kind of figured that one out?
So there's probably a nice way of explaining this, which is something we do, myself and my partner in our venture Psalt, which I'll talk a little bit more in as we go on. And we often talk about shiny and non-shiny stories. Mm-hmm. So there's, like, as you were describing LinkedIn is a great example of the shiny story. For me, I've become a chartered occupational psychologist. I'm an integral coach. I've been an HR director. I've done this. This is the kind of, when you're trying to tell someone or persuade someone that you need a job or tell them about yourself for the first time, we tell the shiny story. Uh-huh. And the non-shiny story is the one that actually holds, for me, the stuff that's interesting and is with a bit which links clearly into my purpose. So I'll just tell you a little bit about that because it will help explain, I guess, more about why that kind of idea of soul and humanity is so important. Mm-hmm. The real difficult point when I started to think about purpose came sort of about 10 or so years into my career. I'd kind of got lost in the trappings of corporate life, bigger mm-hmm. jobs, more money, bigger job titles. What do you need to do that gets you there? And there came a point where I realized that I was at this, was in one particular business where I was basically being asked to fly around Europe and fire people. So I don't know if you've seen the film Up in the Air. I think it's George Clooney, where he kind of flies around America as this kind of corporate HR type person who just walks into offices and fires everyone. And that sort of summarized my life for a while. And it happened to come at a point in time where personally, my wife and I had just got married, and we were struggling to get pregnant. Mm-hmm. And so there was this sort of real deep reflection moment. Mm-hmm. You know, this path that I was on of more money, bigger jobs, wasn't making me happy. The path that was supposed to be associated with it, where, you know, we got married, we bought a house, we had children, wasn't working out at that point. Clearly, we kind of found a solution, given what I told you earlier on. But in that moment, it was really challenging and really difficult. Like I really sort of deeply questioned virtually everything that I was doing. What was the point in it all? Why had I got so caught up on this kind of idea of success, both personally and work? What did all of that do? And I took some time with the help of various people to just reconnect a bit with that story. You know, reconnect a bit with my upbringing. What were my values? What really did matter?
There's a big thing about balance, isn't there? And when we're talking to people about how to connect with their purpose, there is a feeling, isn't there, of being in balance. And there's lots of phrases about your compass and your North Star, but it is a sense that you're connecting with something that feels right. And I think that is the power of connecting with your purpose or your meaning. It's not just that you're doing something righteous, you're actually doing, it's going to sound corny, but what you were made to do. And then when we do that, we feel right. There is that sense of balance that is restored.
Yeah.
So you had you've had a few moments over the last year which have resulted in quite a big move. So talk us through that and what kind of inspired that decision.
One of my closest friends, Sam, has been sort of on that journey with me. We've been kind of friends for about 20 odd years now, and he is from Nigeria originally. When George Floyd was murdered, he wrote a blog post about how it's been to be a black man and a senior black man in the consumer goods industry. Mm-hmm. And that blog post had a very profound impact on me, because Sam is someone that I care about very deeply. I can feel the emotion now, so excuse me. And it created quite a reaction from the people that read it, you know, and so suddenly we were in conversations saying, like, you know, people are calling Sam and saying, well, what are we going to do? You know, there aren't enough black people in this industry. There isn't enough thought as to how we can genuinely change things. And over those years of conversations that he and I have had about why organizations do what they do, why do we work the way we work, there came, and I'm looking above you at the minute, there's a little piece of paper above my computer, which is the first time we drew out what Psalt could be. And this idea of we wanted to, I think our first iteration was make it possible for anyone. So how did we help underrepresented groups take that step up? And our aspiration was to kind of start with young black talent, because it felt like it was the most profound and necessary starting point. Yeah. But how could we move into more groups? Psalt was born from that piece of paper. We started talking to people about our ideas. We got a few kind of early supporters that were really keen for us to help bring more young black talent into the organizations. We started to write kind of ideas and thoughts about how do organizations, how can they truly embrace difference? What might that mean? How might we think about it differently? And, you know, 18 months or so on, I'm now sort of doing this full time, working with some amazing clients, and just doing some work, doing the work that I just love.
Yeah.
Just, you know,
And you gave up your full-time, fairly secure job to do this very recently as well.
yeah,
I think something that struck me about what you were saying in terms of trying to change an organization from the inside out reminds me of a really great story. It's actually a colleague of my wife, and he was a lawyer, and he decided he wanted to retrain as a doctor. And so he dropped out of a very well-paid career, and he did a variety of entrance studying for a couple of years, which was time-consuming and expensive. And then he finally got himself to a position where he could interview for medical school, and he failed his interview.
right,
And he said to the interviewer, well, why do you not think I could become a doctor? And he said, well, throughout the interview, I've asked you questions about your motivation, and what's come across incredibly strongly is that you want to help other people. And he said, that's right. You know, what's wrong with that? And he said, well, what you haven't said is any interest in science. So we think you should become a nurse. And I think that's quite profound, isn't it? I mean, it links into your story as well. Helping people is very different from organizational change. And I think sometimes you have to do things that are wrong to figure out what's right.
yeah.
So give me the shiny story then of Psalt. What's the what is it? If you were talking to somebody who's listening who doesn't really know what you're trying to achieve, what are the what's the shiny bullet points?
So excuse me, let me read this kind of purpose statement to you, because as you can well imagine, Sam and I agonized over these words. So it's like I always like to repeat it the way it was intended once we'd been through iteration 300. So the sole purpose is to make it possible for anyone to be everything they can be and unlock the diverse, rich, and incredible potential that exists in all corners of society. Yeah. So that's it. That's the purpose.
That's amazing. So if that's your why, what's the what and the how?
So what we have are effectively 3 focus areas. So there is Rise, which is all about how do we support underrepresented talent, and that involves us both. We've basically at the moment created a community of a young Black talent, and we are putting on events and programs to help support them into taking their steps into careers. So we run a mentoring program, we run a variety of different development interventions for them to help give them the skills and the knowledge that help them overcome some of the kind of the systemic challenges that they face in stepping into those worlds, alongside presenting opportunities to them about where are great roles for them to step into. So Rise is kind of that idea of helping people step up into their kind of future careers. There's then Add. Add is what is basically an incubator. So we're supporting, again, underrepresented entrepreneurs with their business ideas. So our logic at the time was not everyone wants a corporate career. Some people have got their own things, their own ideas, their own businesses that they want to create. And how can we use our networks, our contacts, our experience to help them take that into something that can get listed in a retailer, for example. When we started this work, I think there were only 2 brands that were Black owned and listed in the major malts in the UK. So I think we're up to about 5 from some of the work that's happened here. And it's still very low numbers, but in both instances we wanted to start working with one particular community. So we were starting with the Black community, but with the intention of, could we build something that then we can expand out into other underrepresented communities and take that learning and impact more broadly. And then underpinning that is what we call Open, which is that idea of how do we help organizations truly embrace difference. So our kind of logic here is that we see lots of organizations trying to do good work in this space. There's lots of attempts at what does it take to bring more diversity into the business and make an inclusive environment that would welcome them. But it took, I guess, to some of the story I've already shared with you, some of those attempts at changing the organizations aren't having the impact that they need to have. And so ours is about a logic of how can we work with those organizations to help facilitate that change and that transition. in a more effective way?
It's incredibly inspiring. I think it's very much aligned with some of the things that lots of organizations are trying to do. I love the fact that you're small and you're agile, and yet you're connecting with larger organizations. That's something that I think is quite central to Unilever's commitments at the moment around underrepresented groups. So I think that's incredible. And I think that that Psalt has a great purpose. But I just want one last question on that, and then we'll start to wrap things up. Is you talked a little while ago about that sense of things not being right, not having the right balance, and that you tried to do the organizational development side of it. It didn't really fit, it didn't really sit well. There's a risk, isn't there, with going into an organization that there's the doing good bit, and there's the helping other people, which is clearly very central to your purpose. And then there's the other side about building a business, which is business administration and organizational development again. And clearly there's some necessary sides of that. How do you keep your finger on the pulse, Gareth? How, going forwards, how do you check that you're doing the stuff where you can bring the greatest value?
When I was describing that kind of journey earlier on of how hard it is to change organizations, that was, a realization that at the time, the levers that I was trying to pull weren't the ones that were going to make the biggest difference, and that actually how you focus time, attention, people's thinking to the topics that are really important is difficult in organizations. Yep. So we're trying to bring that thinking to bear now, to try and help from a very kind of empathetic and compassionate space about how challenging it is to do this work, and that quite a lot of people want answers. They're looking for, tell me what to do, tell me what to say. And actually, when you're dealing with the complexities of human beings in general, there very rarely are exact answers. There are nuances and differences, and the skills it takes to actually embrace the totality of that conversation is complex work. So our focus has been sort of, how do we create a movement? How do we influence thinking far and wide and far beyond what just our capacities are? We have no desire to build some enormous machine. We just want to influence people to think about this topic differently, and along the way to help some people that need help. So most of our work, both the work that we do for the community and helping them step up, and the incubator is totally free. We give that to the community. That's for them, and we figure out ways to fund it through some of the coaching or consulting work that we do. Thankfully, some of the retailers are getting involved, and they're supporting some of our work as well. So I'm not sure if I've answered your question pretty directly.
No, you have.
The idea of like, how do we bring to bear what we've got, but recognize we don't know everything either. And actually, it's far better to work in partnership with people and in dialogue, because the skill and the quality of the work is in different people coming together to kind of come up with new ideas. And I love the idea that for me is the whole point of the work around inclusion. That actually
it is helping
access all those different perspectives and those different ideas. You can get to much more interesting places.
Yeah.
So I certainly don't sit here with any idea for that I know all the answers, but I think what we've got is some interesting stuff to share in this space, and some perspective that is proving to generate new conversations and new ideas.
It's really inspiring. I'm going to put the address of Psalt on the video and share that, so people can get in touch and learn more. I think what listening to you really reminds me that we need to be authentic to our true selves. And I think that the success of your initiative, and like so many, will rely now more than ever on your prospects, on people in that network talking to you and seeing you as being authentic and congruent. And I think that comes from you fulfilling your purpose and being excited and inspired by that one thing. And if you have a conversation with anybody about what it is that they do, when you touch upon that one thing that really ignites their soul or their passion, you see them light up. And I think that is so seductively attractive. That's where the success comes from. Gareth, thank you so much for spending some time with me this morning. That's been really inspiring. Everyone goes on a journey through their lives, and that you've connected with your purpose so early, if I may say so, with so much good to give. Thank you very much. So I'll leave you there, and we'll connect with you again. And Gareth, let's stay in touch and see how things go. But thanks again.
Thank you.